everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ad Project Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Schellard from Ad Advance, and today I am joined by Matt.
So, how you doing, Joe?
I'm doing good today.
Glad to hear.
Like that, throwing it the other way. Yeah, see, that's all I got. Yeah, keeping it simple.
Yeah, succinct to the point. I don't know how I struggle with that question so much. I mean,
you always try to think of something unique. Yeah.
Little dad joke to throw in there.
Yeah. Next time I'll be ready. Yeah. So Matt, I'm excited to go through on this podcast. We've been running with Amazon Marketing Stream data for a while. So we've been getting a lot of hourly data, a lot more insights. We've been running with our Ad Advanced Streamline bidding system. So we've been continuously updating bids as we go and rolling this out to more and more clients. And we're just getting a ton more data coming in. And so for this episode, what we really wanted to focus on are some key insights that we've seen, what's some initial takeaways, and what's some key surprises that we've seen from the data as it's been coming in. So I guess, just jumping in there, like walk us through, like you've been digging into a ton of this data. You've got some awesome different charts. We've been doing some great posts from that. Like walk us through some key insights that you've had overall from Amazon Marketing Stream data.
Sure. So just taking a step back first, reintroducing you to Amazon Marketing Stream.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So we already did a podcast episode introducing Stream and the benefits of like hourly data, hourly conversion rate data. So there's an overview in that, but just to hit some of the high points, Amazon Marketing Stream offers near real-time metrics for your advertising campaigns. So you can get impressions, click-throughs, spends, near real-time conversions. There's a caveat to that we can get into. And then it also allows you to parse out all of that information at the keyword or product target level for sponsored products by hour. And so that's the key utility in Amazon Marketing Stream, is having insight into hourly shopping habits on Amazon, getting insight into consumer shopping habits, like when is peak conversion, when should we be putting our ads in front of shoppers, how does it all tie together, what can we take advantage of?
Yeah, and thanks for going through the overview. And like Matt was saying, I think that's the key difference overall. There's a lot of other ways in how the data is sent to us and what it looks like and everything. But some of the key benefits that we're seeing is before we could just get reports on a daily basis, and the data tended to be delayed quite a bit. Now we can break it down 2 hours, get a ton of different insights on shopping habits throughout the time of day. And then we also get this a lot quicker, so we can implement it and put it into action a lot sooner than we could with previous reporting.
Yeah. So two major benefits are near real-time data and then getting that data by hour. In terms of like real-time data and the utility in that, it's mostly on the traffic side, spend side, budget side. So you can get near real-time budget utilization. Where are my campaigns sitting in terms of spend all throughout the day? So previously it used to be, in budget, out of budget, lights on, lights off kind of situation. So a bit more difficult to react. You could use like the budget rules and some of the budget analytics dashboards within the ad console, but you couldn't tie them into like software or dashboards if you're like a data provider or service provider. And it was clunky to use anyways if you're managing your own ads and using those dashboards. So really valuable being able to see how your campaigns are pacing throughout the day. But for this podcast episode, like we'll be focusing mostly on the hourly component of Amazon Marketing Stream, since that's the game changer. Budget, certainly nice to have, but the implications of hourly data is huge for how we manage campaigns.
Sure. Yep. Thank you for the awesome intro.
Yeah, for sure.
And so now I'm going to kick it right back to you. Walk me through some key insights that you found going through the data. What's kind of stood out for you?
Yeah. So let's start with conversion rates. We talked about that a fair amount in our intro to Amazon Marketing Stream podcast episode, but it's one of the most meaningful metrics that we can graph and utilize by hour. So conversion rate, calculation is orders divided by clicks.
Yeah. So essentially the probability that somebody purchases after they click on the ad.
Yeah. So it's a great measure of relevancy and purchase intent. Key emphasis on purchase intent for this application of data. So when we're serving ads all throughout the day, at what periods are people most likely to click through and then make the acquisition? And there are some major disparities all throughout the day on when people are likely to buy. So what we've done and what we look at are the deviations to average conversion rate, basically like when do we have higher probability of somebody clicking through and placing an order? When will our ad spend produce the most sales, basically? And then, the flip side of that, when are we, wasting spend, or when are our ads less likely to produce a sale? So what we're seeing on the conversion rate side is there is a very rapid scale up in the early morning hours. So conversion rates are at their lowest overnight, like 8 p.m. Pacific time to 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Pacific time. It's really slow. There's not a whole lot of traffic since most people are sleeping, but of the people that are actively browsing, like they're not actively shopping. They're maybe looking at products they want to buy the next day, but chances are they're going to execute a whole new search when they go to make that purchase the next day. So for your ad spend, pretty low likelihood of conversion around that overnight period. But once you get into like 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., there's a massive surge in purchase intent.
And just a note too, when we're talking about these times, Matt already outlined it, but we're talking in Pacific time. Amazon always bases their data on Pacific time, just being based in Seattle. So just add 3 hours to kind of get a perspective on the East Coast when people are waking up. So when we're saying 3 a.m. Pacific, that's really 6 a.m. East Coast time, which has a huge population center too. So if the numbers seem a little bit off, that's a question we commonly get. Well, 3 a.m., it's really, early morning time on the East Coast when people are getting going.
Yeah, great point. So 5 a.m. conversion rate is at its absolute highest point throughout the day. Average conversion rate based on our aggregate client data going back to February 15th is right around the 30% mark. Just for perspective, conversion rates around 11 p.m. when they're at their lowest, like 10%. So we've got a 3x increase in conversion rate from 11 to 5 a.m.
And what's cool too is that when we're talking about this information, this is our overall average data. And so we can actually see higher disparities when we get down to the individual market or clients too. So this gets averaged out for different clients overall. And so that 3x difference, we can actually see it on a more drastic level within some different markets and some different accounts. And so, this was one key takeaway I had. I was amazed at how big of a difference there was throughout the day on the overall average group. And then if you break it down, it can even be more drastic. So that's one piece that blew me away after seeing this data.
Yeah. And there are huge implications for conversion rate disparities like this all throughout the day. Sure. So because it tells you the probability of a click converting into an order, it means that your advertising spend at 5 a.m. is likely to produce 3 times as many sales as your advertising spend at 11 p.m. Sure. So it's taking these variances to the average gives you a really good kind of roadmap of where to take your bids throughout the day. So we can let your competitors spend more during those low conversion times. We can save on CPCs. And then when our ad spend's the most likely to produce a conversion, we can really push hard, get ads in the best placements, and make sure that we're getting our products in front of people at peak intent. Yep. So it's a huge competitive advantage.
And as we talk about some of these graphs too on the podcast, just know you can go check them out. So we've got these posted. You can go to the website at advance.com, go to resources. This is one of the key articles featured. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. Find us, and we're constantly posting these too, so you can see them in visual form to follow along. Easiest way to go into the website itself, but any of our other social feeds too, we're covering these and constant different podcast or posts coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to be talking through a ton of numbers in this episode, and a visual is really nice. So as you're listening, I'd recommend just bringing it up and checking out the articles so you can see some of the trends for yourself. Yeah. The visualizations make a huge difference in being able to like demonstrate the importance of these hourly metrics.
For sure. Yep. So as we look at it, and this is what we talked about in the previous podcast episode too. So conversion rate really starts to go up around 3 a.m., peaks around 5 to 6 a.m. Again, this is all in Pacific time, and then continually starts to tail off as it goes through the afternoon and getting into the night, and then kind of hits the trough coming up in the middle of the night, anywhere from 10 a.m. to 1 a.m., that time frame, all very quiet overall, and then repeats that trend again. Yeah. So one question that we got quite a bit is, all right, conversion rate data is great, but in the middle of the night, I'm not having too much traffic overall. Like there's not that many people who are browsing at 2 a.m. So how does the total traffic piece tie into this? And what were the key things that you found there?
Yeah. So looking at impressions and clicks, it follows in the overnight hours a fairly similar trend. So there's to conversion rate. So overnight, low conversion rate, overnight, low traffic too. There's a big ramp up in the morning as people start to get ready for their day, maybe doing some morning shopping, or when they get into the office or at work, they're popping open their browsers and doing a little shopping.
Yep. A lot of work shoppers.
Totally. Yeah. So there's a really rapid scale up in traffic starting around the 3 a.m. hour, and that continues its ascent, and it's a pretty steep one. So we're talking like, let's just say, well, our numbers are, we've got millions and millions, we've got billions of impressions graphed in here. So like 30 million impressions at 2 a.m. To 1.4 billion or 140 million at 9 a.m. And so this is so tough to visualize talking through a podcast. Yeah. But it's a really, really steep scale.
I'll paint the visual. Yeah. So traffic definitely bottoms out at like 1 or 2 a.m. as you'd expect. And then starting at 4 or 5 a.m. really starts to come up, and it ramps up until about 10 a.m. At that point, it tends to be pretty flat through the day and actually goes through a little peak around like 6, 7 p.m. at night on Pacific time again. So that's like, 9, 10 o'clock on Eastern time. And then after that point, getting into the middle of the night really starts to trend back down again. So if you look at the two graphs, the impressions doesn't ramp up quite as fast as the conversion rate. So in the early morning hours, we have this really high converting period, but traffic is ramping up. Then conversion rates start to drop off a bit throughout the day, but now traffic's really holding steady. And then in the afternoon, we've got a lot of browsers, but conversion rates aren't as high overall. So a lot of traffic, but purchase intent is lower over those periods. So kind of painting that picture.
Yeah. And then, so I guess if you're a brand selling on Amazon and your key goal is efficiency, sure. Those early morning hours, even though there's lower volume, tend to be really solid. I'm kind of putting the cart in front of the horse here because we haven't talked about ROAS trends by hour and CPC by hour, which are really interesting. Yeah. I guess, so let me just take a step back. And if you're a brand concerned about reach and maximizing traffic, getting your ads in front of people, building as much exposure as possible, chances are you're not running out of budget throughout the day. But if you are, it's really important that your ads are served around the 6 p.m. time frame, at least through that period, Pacific time, because that's when we have peak shopping traffic on Amazon. That's when most people are searching. So that midday through into the evening hour is when it's really big for
peak
traffic.
Of traffic is going to be
exactly
for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So before we get into ROAS trends, I guess let's talk about CPC next. So this was a key item that really surprised me. I expected the trend to look this way, but I didn't expect it to be so drastic. So I'll take the initial shot at describing this one, and then you can give me the implications for this. So what we're seeing is average cost per click is very high in the early morning hours. So it peaks right away in the early morning hours after it switches over to a new day. But then it continually tails off throughout the day. And so if we look at average cost per click, going from over $1.40, so $1.44 at 1 a.m., and by 11 p.m. down to 91 cents. And so the percent change there is just crazy to me. I did not expect that it would be this drastic. I thought that it would tail off throughout the day as people ran out of budget, but to see it be this drastic really blew me away. So when you're looking at this chart, kind of walk me through how you're thinking about what's happening here.
Sure. So when you start out the day, CPCs are at their highest, and then it continues to tail off throughout the day. Very consistent. Every single subsequent hour, CPC is slightly lower than the preceding hour. Key reason for that is advertisers are running out of budget. So previously, we didn't have access to hourly data, and so bids weren't fluctuating by the hour. Sure. Bids were set based on longer time frames for the full course of the day. We didn't have any benchmark to increase bids, when conversion rate's higher, when traffic's higher. And most of the market still doesn't have that. So this trend is going to remain true for the most part. I would expect moving forward. Yeah. But yeah, just the impact of people running out of budget has a huge effect on cost per click.
I didn't expect that you would have this much of an impact. I didn't expect that this many people are on average are running out of budget throughout the day. And so I expected it would slowly tail off, maybe by like 10% throughout the day. But just with how drastic it is, it's pretty crazy. There must be a ton of people running out of budget throughout the day.
Yeah. Just looking at like variance to average. So we have a $1 average CPC, let's say, at the beginning of the day. It may be around $1.30. At the end of the day, it may be around 80 cents. So massive swing, in terms of the price you're paying, significantly affects the advertising feasibility of your products. Like if you have an ACoS target of 50%, sure, you may, given the low overnight conversion rate and the high CPCs, you may be at 100% in the overnight hours when cost per click is really high and conversion rate's really low. And then you may be at a 20% ROAS at 5 a.m. or at noon when cost per click is walked down even further and conversion rate is still high. So yeah, just massive implications when you combine those two for your advertising and your advertising feasibility.
Yeah, just as a scenario. So the peak cost per click during the day is at 1 or 2 a.m. Which correlates to some of the worst converting time periods for those clicks. So at that time, you're paying the most per click, and also have a really low likelihood of that actually turning into a sale. And so what we're kind of getting to is the key action items and how we utilize this is, what if we don't pay that much for that cost per click at that point? So we drop our bid, and in many cases we probably just don't win impressions at that 1 to 2 a.m. time period, or we get worse impression or worse placements, which moves us down the page, but we don't pay as much on a cost per click basis. So we can save some cash there. And now what if we implement that when CPC, our cost per click, has tailed off throughout the day, the market's cost per click. So now we can outbid our competitors, and we have a much higher likelihood of actually turning that click into a sale. That's really where we start to get into how you can use this data. We use our Ad Advanced Streamline system to use machine learning, and we're talking aggregate trends. We actually break it down a lot further, and we go to the individual accounts and we see what those trends look like and group them together and use a lot of regression analysis and classification and all that good stuff. But really, you don't have to even go that far. You can take these initial trends, and even if you've got a software system that can do basic day parting, you can pick different periods where you want to advertise for, or you could implement a pretty easy system just based off of the general trends you're seeing, and maybe update bids on a certain frequency. So you don't have to get as in depth as us. But where you can really use this data is now if we can modify bids to kind of match the conversion rate that's expected over that time. So we can change our bids up and down based off of how likely our clicks are to turn into sales. Or you could even use day parting and just say, okay, I'm not even going to advertise from 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. Pacific time every day. I'm just going to save my advertising spend up for those better performing periods. Even that can have a pretty significant impact, especially if you're budget limited or tacos is a major focus for you. Those areas where if we can just make sure that we're increasing the return that we're getting for our ad spend, and then we're also getting those impressions and those clicks when it's most likely to turn into a sale, that's really the power in the data. And while the trends are cool, now it's how can we utilize it? And this is the way that we're taking that data as we go.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. For us, given that we have an hourly bidding system or a continuous bidding system through Ad Advanced Streamline, like we don't necessarily need to day part because we have a system that takes all of these factors into account and updates bids throughout the day. So when purchase intent is at its floor, bids are at the floor. When conversion rate's at its peak, our bids are at their peak. So we're always bidding relative to the premium or discount of each click.
Yep. Relative to the performance that we expect we're going to get from the ad at that period in time.
So you can run your campaigns continuously throughout the day. There's no need to segment by hour. But if you're budget limited, that's where day parting really shines in isolating the periods that you're running ads to peak conversion rate and peak ROAS time periods. So let's talk about ROAS a little bit. We've covered cost per click. We've covered conversion rate. Yep. Assuming like average selling price doesn't change throughout the day, it doesn't. You combine the cost per click trend with the conversion trend, and basically what you end up with is the ROAS variance throughout the day. So given that conversion rate is very, very high in the 5 a.m. hours, even though cost per click is really high early in the morning, ROAS still becomes favorable at 5 a.m. So you're paying a premium for those clicks because most advertisers are in budget still. But given that conversion rates, 40, 50% above the average, that's enough to overcome it. And you see favorable ROAS over that period. Sure. And even though conversion rate is below average around like the 5 p.m. hour, cost per click is well below average. So we see a favorable ROAS all the way through 5 p.m. Is where it flips. So basically 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. based on aggregate data is the golden hours for advertising, where we've got a favorable ROAS because either conversion rate is favorable or because cost per click has dropped.
Yep, to offset that. Yep. And so, just think of it if, from a simple case, what if we can spend, say you were spending, ad spend was nice and level throughout the day. I know it won't be because we get traffic fluctuations as we go. But if we can take more of our ad spend from that 5 p.m. to 5 a.m. time frame where we typically see worse results, and we can move some of that into the 5 a.m. to the 5 p.m. time frame when we're seeing better results, either because conversion rate is high or cost per click has dropped off enough where the conversion rate where it's at, it makes sense. What we're trying to do is we're trying to find these periods where the market is really mispricing the performance of the ads. And during those periods, all right, let's spend more because we're going to get a better return. And then in those worst periods, let's let our competitors spend their money and let's save ours and be able to move it to this highest performance period. That's essentially what we're doing. You can do that from strict rules using day parting, so that could be a good general takeaway. Like if you have basic day parting software, just advertise from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's one way that you could implement it. Again, we use full bid controls throughout the day. We don't want to completely give up on advertising during those worst performing times. The one caveat is that we're just not willing to pay as much to get those ad placements during that time. And so, pretty easy to implement. A lot of software tools are able to do day partying. You can even do it manually if you want to. You can have a couple bulk upload files, and you do one at 5 a.m. Pacific time, and then then you do the other one when you're leaving the office to turn everything off, or you could even manually go through and pause and enable the campaigns as you go. So a lot of key ways that you can implement using this data overall.
Totally. Yeah.
So we covered a ton of different graphs and charts and tried to describe it as good as we can. But I'd encourage you to go either check out our posts or go to the website, and you can take a look at the resources that we've got. I think this will better explain it. You can see how all these pieces tie together. But key takeaways are there's some pretty easy ones that you can implement from the start. If you want to get that 80% of the benefit, that 80-20 rule. But if you want to take it even further, now look at somebody who's potentially doing like continuous bidding or implementing, where you can take all these pieces really into detail. There's just so much opportunity. I was honestly surprised with some of these trends and how drastic they were, which is why we're so excited about it. So, well, any other items to add, Matt?
I think we covered it.
All right. Well, as always, we really appreciate you listening to this episode of the Ad Project podcast, and we look forward to you tuning in to the next episode.